Good morning. I begin today mindful of what has come before me in chapel over recent weeks, and equally mindful of what is still to come before Prize Day arrives in just 26 days, if you can believe it. This spring we've heard from Kim Fook and from Liz O'Leary and from Mr. Charpentier, powerful talks, all of them. We're going to hear from Mr. Baker. We're going to hear from Mr. Chauvin, and I'm certain their talks will be powerful as well. Yet it is the talks given by members of the class of 2015 that are most prominent in my mind this morning. In certain respects, this is true every spring at Brooks. Sixth formers reflecting on time spent here, relationships formed here, roots set here, ups and downs had here, grab our attention and get us thinking. Yet I've been especially moved by what we have heard from members of the class of 2015 this spring, and I suspect that will continue with a number of talks still to come. I've had two thoughts in mind when trying to pull these remarks together. One of the two coming to me by virtue of what Xander Timpson shared with us last week. The other is about the time of year we're in and has been influenced by the proximity of this talk to our Kippy Little service on Monday, along with what's running through my mind as I think about the precious little time the class of 2015 has left as members of the student body. Let me start with what Xander had to say. I thought his talk last week was pretty incredible. The confidence he showed in his school by putting an awful lot on the line. His willingness to be vulnerable. The fact that what he shared came from his heart entirely. I don't think I could have given a talk like the one he gave when I was in high school. In fact, I'm sure I couldn't have. And I admire his candor and his honesty and his integrity, and I have all year. You may recall a moment in Xander's talk when he turned and took a look at this cross back here and wished that it was a peace symbol instead. This cross in our chapel has never moved me all that much in any direction, to be perfectly honest. I suppose that might have something to do with my upbringing. I was raised Catholic and dragged to church as a kid until I was old enough to drive, at which point I told my mother I was going to church, but instead went to Dunkin' Donuts every week with a friend who told his mother the same thing. We would usually duck into church to get a feel for the priest's sermon, just about 5 minutes or so, just in case our mothers asked us about it when we got home. Through all of this, I grew up with crosses around me, and despite CCD class after CCD class, my mother taking me to the Stations of the Cross every Good Friday, I never really thought much about the cross. It was irrelevant to me in so many ways. Similarly, the cross in here, our cross, has never felt particularly material to what happens in here. Yet I realize my comfort may come from familiarity, from some numbness about it even. Yet despite my strong indifference to the cross, Xander's wish didn't just wash over me. I've been puzzling over why. On the one hand, I've been a history teacher of some sort for what is still the majority of my life at Brooks, and have pondered in that capacity whether organized religion of all kinds has done more harm than good in the history of the world. One could make an argument that the cross, just like ours, has been behind a considerable amount of evil that has been perpetrated in human history. This has always troubled me. It still troubles me. With this in mind, why wouldn't we want a peace symbol in this space? Perhaps even in place of the cross, as Xander suggested. On the other hand, I wonder if there might be some points of intersection worth driving at here. Not so much about what the cross has perhaps meant at points in time, but more about what our cross and our identity as an Episcopal school might mean, with Xander's aspiration very much in mind. You may or may not know that we are members of the National Association of Episcopal Schools. As such, we are supposed to be mindful of various principles of good practice that this organization authors and updates from time to time. I don't know that you'd agree with everything on the NAES website, but I do think you'd find the principles of good practice for equity and justice in Episcopal schools to be persuasive, to be in line with what Xander called us to consider. Here are some excerpts, and I'm quoting. Episcopal schools strive to live fully into Christ's gospel call such that barriers which divide us may crumble, suspicions disappear, and hatreds cease, that our divisions being healed, we may live in justice and peace. Or, Episcopal schools take seriously their calling to strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being. Or, Episcopal schools strive to be inclusive communities that promote open and reasoned dialogue, that breaks down barriers and promotes human understanding. And one final one. Students learn best when they are known, valued, connected, and safe. Episcopal schools create and sustain a school culture that advances the dignity and well-being of each person and promotes a genuine sense of belonging. We were founded as an Episcopal school. I don't know that we've ever really figured out what that actually means for us, although we're working on it. But I believe there is great potential for alignment between what Xander called us to consider, correctly, I think, and what, in fact, being an Episcopal school can allow us to stand for. I believe that our challenge is not so much about replacing the cross with a peace symbol, but about defining what our cross is going to mean to us, inclusively, and with equity, justice, and peace very much in mind. My second thought for the day comes with Kippy Little Day and the precious few days left for the class of 2015 in mind. I anticipated being moved by having Kippy's family, Mr. Aiken, Miss O'Leary, and others with us for Monday's service, but found myself moved even more than I thought I'd be as the service and day wore on. As I sat right here where Brian's sitting, I was overcome by watching Kippy's mother and sister sitting right here hold hands through the whole service with tears in their eyes. As I looked at them, I suppose the obvious was underlined, that the type of loss Kippy's family experienced when she was taken so tragically and so young doesn't ever fade. I knew our service more than 31 years after the accident would mean a lot to them, but I think it meant even more than any of us realize. Why? Because as Kippy's mother shared with me before leaving, We remember her. That's it. By simply remembering, what we did on Monday felt like a gift to them. They won't ever forget it. To be part of a community that remembers in the ways that we do felt awfully good to me on Monday. The service also reminded me about how important it is to be present. Not because a tragedy along the lines of what happened to Kippy is something we should worry about, but because being present, living in the moment, and experiencing your life fully is something worth striving for. It's so much easier said than done. And I've never figured it out. I'm 47 years old and I'm still working on it. But working hard to be present feels especially important to me when I think about the 105 members of the class of 2015 right in here. For those of you who started as third formers, your first day of classes at Brooks was 1,325 days ago. 961 days ago for those who started in the fourth form. 597 days ago for the few of you who started in the fifth form. And all of you have just 26 days left. I suspect in so many ways, you've never felt more rooted. You've never felt more connected. You've never felt more in touch with one another than you do now. And despite being fully ready for what's next in your life, I wish you had a bit more time. We can't freeze it. But there's a part of me that wishes you could just be in this moment with one another for a bit longer. So for what it's worth, I'll close with a few thoughts on what I think might help you finish well. Think about the people who have been central to your life, friends and teachers, and ask yourself whether they know that in no uncertain terms. Have you been as clear with your friends as Xander was in his chapel talk last week? Make sure you are. Don't leave words left unsaid. Think about a younger student you may not know well but have admired from afar. Make sure she or he knows. And don't underestimate how much that will mean to that younger student. Say thank you to a lot of people. Your parents, the teachers you knew cared about you and pushed you the most, the folks who took care of you in the health center, or prepared your omelet on Sunday, or made sure your dormitory and campus were well cared for, or that your team was always equipped with what it needed. You can't say thank you enough, and you'll be glad you did. Get in touch with this magnificent 251-acre campus. Don't leave any stone unturned. Read the plaques on all the stones and walls all over the campus, stretching from the boathouses to the north gate to the perimeter of the campus beyond the observatory. Read the inscriptions on those stone benches, on those walls. Visit the columbarium right behind the chapel here. Visit the places that underline how we remember at Brooks School. And know as you do that you will be remembered as well. Is it possible that some of you have never walked the entire fire trail as the sun is going down on a clear and perfect evening? Is that possible? If it is, do that more than once over these next 26 days. All the way from the boathouses to the northwest corner of the campus and up the hill to the fields. Do this slowly. Do all you can to allow the beauty of this campus to become emblazoned in your mind, because I assure you that this campus will always be one of the most beautiful places you've ever seen in your life. Sit in a pew for 15 minutes at some point, by yourself, without a device, and just let your mind wander. Know in that moment that this will always be a place where you can do that. It will always be a place that gives you a sense of where you are. Walk the playing fields, visit the rooms, and sit in the seats that have mattered to you. Experience it all by living in the moment, by being present, by finishing well. Do all you can to leave the school without any regrets. There's still time. Here's to a great 26 days. Thank you.